Hello, friends. Thank you for being with me. Subscribe, like, and let's get started.
Emma was wiping her hands on a kitchen towel, standing by the window. She looked up at the sky, feeling excited, as if she was 20 again. It wasn't just Ethan's birthday. It was a chance to bring back something that seemed to be slipping away from their relationship. Comfort, lightness, spontaneity. There was a piece of paper on the kitchen table with a neatly written evening plan. She sketched it together with Sophia. A double date to celebrate a birthday. This idea came up when they were having coffee at their favorite coffee shop. Sophia, as always energetic and full of ideas, suggested choosing a restaurant where delicious dishes were served and you could enjoy a calm atmosphere. "I know a place," Sophia was saying, toying with her coffee spoon. "There's great lighting, music to set the mood, and desserts that will make you forget about your problems." Emma smiled. But deep down, she doubted that the restaurant and desserts would be able to bring back the spark she had been so desperately looking for lately. However, she couldn't resist Sophia's enthusiasm. When evening came, Emma was standing in front of the mirror, putting on her favorite red dress, which Ethan adored. It perfectly emphasized her figure, and the light shine of the fabric made her image even brighter. She applied a thin layer of lipstick, straightened her hair, and stepped back to assess herself. This was the moment when she hoped Ethan would see her as the woman she was when they first met. Ethan was in the living room, fiddling with the watch Emma had given him that morning. His calmness irritated her. He never showed any excitement before any events, and this evening was no exception. "Are you ready?" Emma peeked into the room, adjusting her earrings. Ethan looked up and narrowed his eyes a little. "You look good." "It's amazing," he said with a slight smile. Emma smiled back, but inside she felt a pang of doubt. That's the same thing he says every year, she thought. Half an hour later, they were approaching the restaurant. Sophia and Jason were waiting for them outside. Sophia shone in a form-fitting black dress, which perfectly complemented her bright red lips. Jason, tall and reserved, stood beside her like her shadow. "Well, finally," Sophia exclaimed when she saw Emma's car. "We were already beginning to think that you were lost." "Yeah, the traffic was terrible," Emma replied, getting out of the car. They went inside, where the soft candlelight reflected off the glass surfaces. The waiter led them to a table by the window overlooking the sparkling city. "It's just perfect here," Emma said, looking around the room. Sophia wasted no time ordering snacks and drinks, enthusiastically talking about each menu item. "Jason, you should try this wine," she said, pushing the menu towards him. Jason smiled, but his gaze was already on Ethan. "Hey, Ethan, do you remember how we tried a similar wine at a tasting last summer?" he asked. Emma watched their conversation surreptitiously. The men chatted easily, discussing wine and fishing, while Sophia whispered softly in her ear. "Have you noticed how Ethan has been looking at you all evening? You obviously have a plan, girlfriend." Emma laughed, but in her heart she was grateful to Sophia for this evening. She felt a lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. When the main course arrived, the conversation became more lively. Sophia enthusiastically told the story of how she and Jason tried to learn how to dance salsa, and Jason inserted sarcastic comments, causing laughter from everyone at the table. Emma caught Ethan's eye, and he gave her a small smile. For a moment, it seemed to her that this was the Ethan again, who could cheer her up in a second with one look. "Well, let's drink to you, Ethan," Sophia said, raising her glass. Everyone joined in the toast, and Emma suddenly felt her heart fill with warmth. Maybe this evening is what we need, she thought. When dinner came to an end, Emma suggested returning to Sophia and Jason for dessert and continuing the evening. Ethan looked at her in surprise, but nodded. "That sounds great," Jason added, with a quick glance at Sophia. They left the restaurant laughing and chatting, unaware that this evening would be the beginning of a whole new chapter in their lives. Emma took off her shoes as they entered Sophia and Jason's house. Their spacious living room was already prepared to continue the evening. On the low coffee table, there was a bottle of wine, glasses, and a box of dessert, which Sophia claimed she had brought from her favorite French bakery. "Make yourself at home," Sophia announced, kicking off her sandals and sitting down on the soft sofa. Jason silently took over the duties of the host, offering drinks to everyone and deftly opening a bottle of wine. Emma glanced at Ethan, who was leaning slightly against the wall with a familiar, calm expression on his face. She knew that look. He watched, evaluated, but rarely shared his thoughts aloud. "Well, how was your evening?" "What is it?" she asked softly, coming closer. "A good one," he replied, smiling briefly. "You did your best, Em." This simple answer always pleased and disappointed her at the same time. She expected more, admiration, gratitude, or at least some hint of admiration for her efforts. But Ethan was like that, calm, balanced, sometimes insensitive. Meanwhile, Sophia was already pouring glasses for everyone and chatting as usual. Okay, she said, raising her glass. "The evening is just wonderful, but something is missing." Emma sat down next to her, feeling the wine relax her. "What is it? What is it?" she asked, interested in her friend's energy. "A little fun, a little risk, a little games." Sophia turned to the others, her eyes burning. "And what do you suggest?" Jason, sitting in the chair opposite, looked at his wife with slight suspicion. "A simple idea," she began. "We all know each other so well. And let's check how well and how to do it." Ethan took the glass, clearly wary. Sophia smiled her trademark, almost predatory smile. "We will temporarily switch partners. Just for fun. You and Emma," she pointed at Jason, "will be a couple, and Ethan and I will be the other one. For a couple of hours. Let's pretend we're married." Emma felt her heart beat faster. "Is this some kind of joke?" She laughed, but her voice betrayed a note of alarm. "Of course it's a joke." Sophia waved her hand. "But isn't it interesting? Let's see how we do. It's just fun." Jason and Ethan exchanged glances. The men clearly didn't know how to react. "It's innocent," Sophia added, trying to break the awkwardness. "Just imagine that you are on a theatrical stage. No commitment, just laughter." Emma met Jason's gaze. He smiled softly, almost reassuringly. "Why not?" he finally said. "Okay," Emma said, feeling a mixture of excitement and a strange anxiety take hold of her. They started. Sophia, as always, took the initiative, joking loudly about how difficult it is to be Ethan's wife. "Ethan, honey," she cooed with mock reproach. "Why don't you ever take out the trash?" Everyone laughed, but Emma noticed how Sophia easily put her hand on Ethan's shoulder, as if it was completely natural. Meanwhile, Jason turned to Emma, his manner calm, almost charming. "So, dear," he said, raising his glass. "What did you do today while I was at work?" Emma laughed, trying to get into the game. "Oh, as always, shopping, a little cleaning, dinner preparation. That's all a wife needs to do, right?" They exchanged smiles, but there was something new in that look, something indescribable. At first it was all a joke. Sophia made funny accusations against Ethan, while Jason, on the contrary, portrayed the perfect partner for Emma. But over time, the atmosphere has changed. When Sophia and Ethan went into the kitchen to bring dessert, Jason leaned forward slightly, his eyes focused on Emma. "Do you notice how easily she does everything?" "What is it?" he asked, nodding towards the kitchen. "Is she?" Emma was confused. "Sophia?" "Yes," he chuckled. "She can make a scene out of nothing, but that's her charm, don't you think?" Emma felt that the conversation was moving into a more personal plane. "And you, Jason, aren't as quiet as you seem," she replied, trying to lighten the mood. He laughed, and then his gaze became softer, almost searching. "Do you often say what you feel?" "What is it?" he asked suddenly. Emma blinked. "What do you mean?" "Well, it seems to me that you keep a lot to yourself." He sipped from the glass. "You look at the world as if you were waiting for something that may never happen." Emma opened her mouth to reply, but at that moment Ethan and Sophia returned, bringing plates of dessert. The atmosphere was light again, but somewhere deep down, Emma felt that this evening had launched something she hadn't expected. The game continued, but it was no longer just a joke. Emma nervously adjusted her dress, feeling the air in Sophia's living room getting thicker by the minute. Jason sat across from her, his calmness almost hypnotic. Sophia and Ethan were laughing across the room, but their voices sounded muffled, as if through a glass wall. "Is everything all right?" Jason asked softly, his gaze intent, but not oppressive. "Yes, it's simple." "Unusual," Emma replied, unable to hide her slight embarrassment. "Sometimes the unusual is good," he said, smiling slightly. Emma couldn't help but smile back. There was something soothing in his voice, but at the same time disturbing. She glanced in the direction of Sophia, who was theatrically leaning against Ethan's shoulder, laughing at his next joke. They looked too comfortable, too close. "Sophia, you seem to be enjoying your new role too much," Emma teased, trying to bring lightness back into her mood. "Of course," Sophia replied with a playful smile. "Your husband is the perfect partner." Although, I would have corrected his sense of humor. "Hey, that's part of my charm," Ethan interjected with a grin. Emma shook her head, but inwardly felt strangely uneasy. She noticed how Sophia squeezed Ethan's shoulder slightly, a gesture almost imperceptible, but there was something too natural about it. Jason, catching her thoughtfulness, leaned closer. "Do you miss me?" "What is it?" he asked softly. Emma flinched, not immediately understanding the question. "What?" "No, of course not," she replied, trying to hide her embarrassment behind a smile. "You look like your mind is far away from here," he continued. "If you want, we can go out into the fresh air." Emma thought for a moment. The offer seemed unexpected to her, but something in his tone made her nod. "Okay, not for long." They stood up, and Emma noticed Ethan glance at them briefly, but didn't say anything. Sophia was too busy telling him another story. It was chilly outside, and Emma shivered, feeling the night air touch her skin. "I'm sorry if I put you in an awkward position," Jason said, holding the door open for her. "No, it's okay. Simply, I'm not used to evenings like this," she admitted. "You mean the game? Or the atmosphere?" Emma looked at him, his calmness almost disarming. "Both, probably." Jason smiled. "Sometimes it's useful to go beyond the usual," he said, stopping next to me. "It allows you to see things from a different angle." Emma suddenly felt that there was more to his words than just politeness. She looked at him again and saw something in his eyes that excited her. "Do you always philosophize like that?" "What is it?" she asked with a slight grin, trying to defuse the tension. "Only when I want someone to feel comfortable," he replied with a soft smile. Emma laughed, but that laugh was more to hide her inner discomfort. Meanwhile, in the house, Sophia and Ethan continued their lively conversation. Sophia leaned closer to him, her voice quieter. "Does your wife know that you can be so funny?" "What is it?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. Ethan laughed, though there was a slight tension in his laugh. "I think she knows," he replied, but his gaze became a little distant. "You know, you're a little private," Sophia said, "but there is something attractive about it. Do you always talk so openly?" Ethan joked, trying to change the subject. Sophia smiled and sipped her wine, but her gaze remained fixed on him. Outside, Emma and Jason were still talking. Jason talked about how he and Sophia met, how their marriage went through difficult times. "Marriage is a job," he said, his tone serious. "But sometimes it seems that you invest more than you get." Emma nodded, but didn't answer right away. "You know," she began after a pause, "I feel that way sometimes, too." Jason looked at her carefully, but didn't say anything. He just waited for her to continue. "I feel like we're with Ethan. We stopped seeing each other," she said, her voice low. "It's complicated," he agreed, "especially when it seems that everything is going in the usual circle." Emma felt strangely relieved that she could say it out loud. When they returned to the house, the atmosphere was different. Sophia and Ethan were sitting closer than they had been before, their conversations quieter, almost intimate. Emma sat down on the sofa, feeling something shift in her soul. The evening went on, but for all four of them, it had already ceased to be a simple game. Emma sat down next to Jason, trying not to look at Sophia and Ethan. It seemed that even their laughter sounded different now, quieter, more intimate, as if they were sharing something that should not concern others. Emma took a glass of wine, but her hands were shaking. She took a sip, trying to hide her inner tension. "Is everything all right?" Jason asked quietly, sitting a little closer. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but there was genuine concern in it. "Yes," she answered quickly, turning away. "I'm just a little tired." Jason looked at her carefully, but said nothing. He leaned back, resting his hand on the back of the sofa. His relaxed demeanor was almost infectious, But Emma still couldn't shake the feeling that what was happening in the room was getting too personal. "You seem to be having a great time," Emma said with a slight grin, turning to Sophia and Ethan. Sophia turned her head, her eyes glistening from the wine she had drunk. "How else could it be, Em?" she said, as if challenging him. "Your husband is just a storehouse of hidden talents." Ethan laughed, but noticed Emma's face tighten a little. "Sophia seems to want more from me than you do, Em," he joked, trying to lighten the mood. Emma responded with a tight smile, but her chest was boiling. Jason, who had been watching her from under half-closed eyelids, suddenly broke the silence. "Ethan, are you sure you know what Emma wants?" he said. His voice sounded innocent, but the room was noticeably quieter. Ethan frowned, but said nothing. Sophia raised her eyebrows, as if interested in this sudden turn. That's an interesting question," Ethan finally said. "But I think we all know what our partners want." Emma looked at him, feeling like all the eyes in the room were on her. She wanted to say something witty to get away from this conversation, but the words stuck in her throat. "Maybe we should change the subject," she suggested softly, feeling her heart pounding somewhere in her ears. "No, that's a good question," Sophia interjected, her voice sounding assertive. "We're all here to get out of our comfort zone, so to speak, aren't we? Why not get to know each other better?" Jason chuckled briefly, but didn't say anything. He reached for a bottle of wine and filled his glass, as if preparing for the evening to take an even more unexpected turn. Emma felt her fingers tighten on the stem of her glass. She glanced at Jason, who was looking at her as if he was trying to read her mind. "Emma, what do you think?" Sophia finally asked, her eyes full of expectation. "I'm thinking," Emma began, trying to keep calm, but her voice faltered treacherously. "I think sometimes people take each other for granted." These words hung in the air. Sophia raised her eyebrows slightly, and Ethan frowned, as if he didn't understand where it suddenly came from. "Do you think so?" "What is it?" he asked, looking at her in surprise. Emma met his gaze, trying not to look away. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she didn't want to hide her feelings. "Yes," she said, her voice firmer. "Sometimes it seems to me that they stop seeing each other." These words hit everyone present like a bolt from the blue. Sophia slowly put the glass down on the table. Her smile faded. Ethan looked away, as if trying to make sense of what he'd said. Jason, on the other hand, looked at Emma with approval, as if she had taken a step that he himself had not decided on for a long time. "Maybe it's not that bad," Jason said suddenly. "Sometimes such moments help to understand what is really important." Sophia sighed and straightened up, as if preparing to say something, but her words were interrupted by the vibration of the phone. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "Excuse me, I need to take this," she said, getting up and heading out into the hallway. There was a tense silence in the room. Emma felt Jason lightly touch her elbow, drawing her attention. "You're doing great," he said softly, and his voice sounded so sincere that her eyes stung. Emma nodded, but remained silent. She felt that she had taken the first step towards something unknown. The silence in the car was deafening. Ethan stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Emma watched him surreptitiously, feeling her own emotions overwhelm her. This evening, this strange game, revealed something she had been trying to ignore for a long time. She couldn't understand how such simple actions, ordinary conversations, could leave such a deep mark. "Will you tell me how you like your evening?" Emma broke the silence, her voice sounding a little sharper than she intended. Ethan glanced at her briefly, but didn't answer. His silence was louder than any word. "Okay, maybe I'll start," she added, hugging herself. "It was strange." "Yes, it's strange," he finally replied, without taking his eyes off the road. His reticence irritated her even more. "Are you going to comment on this somehow?" "What is it?" she asked, unable to hold back any longer. Ethan exhaled sharply and parked the car in front of their house. Turning off the engine, he finally turned to her. "Do you really want to discuss this?" His voice was even, but there was tension in it. "Yes," Emma replied, not looking away. "I think we should talk." He was silent for a few seconds, then opened the door and got out of the car. "Let's talk at home." Emma followed him, feeling her irritation grow. He was always like that, closed, avoiding confrontation. They entered the house, where they were greeted by the usual silence. Emma turned on the light and, without taking off her coat, turned to him. "So?" Her voice trembled. "Are you going to tell me what you think?" Ethan dropped the keys on the table and turned to her. "I think this is a game. I discovered something that we were both afraid to admit," he finally said. Emma froze. His words sounded like an echo of her own thoughts. "And what exactly? What is it?" she asked, her voice quieter, almost a whisper. "That we've lost each other, Emma." His voice hardened. "Something has changed, and if you don't see it, then maybe we're both just used to ignoring it." She felt her throat go dry. Are you saying that we don't love each other anymore?" Her voice trembled. "I do not know," he answered honestly, lowering his gaze. "But I know one thing. We live next to each other, not together. And I'm afraid that this habit has become the norm." Emma felt her eyes sting. She turned away, trying to hide her tears, but Ethan noticed it. "Emma," his voice softened. "No, don't," she interrupted, raising her hand. "You're right. We're pretending, but I do not know how to fix it." He came closer, but did not touch her. "Maybe we need some time?" he suggested. Emma looked at him, her eyes full of pain. "Time? What is it?" she asked. "Do you want us to separate?" "No," he replied sharply. "I just think we both need to figure out what we want. Take your time. Don't pretend that everything is fine." She lowered her head, feeling her thoughts get confused. "Do you think this will help?" "What is it?" she asked. "I do not know," he admitted. "But I know that it can't go on like this." Emma nodded silently. She didn't know what to say. For the first time in a long time, her confidence collapsed. "Okay," she finally replied. "But if we take a break, what does it mean?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes full of doubt and pain. "It means we're going to try to figure ourselves out," he said, "and maybe we'll figure out what to do next." Emma sat down on the sofa, feeling her strength drain away. "I agree," she said softly. Ethan sat down next to her, but didn't touch her. "We can get through this, Emma," he said. "I hope so." She nodded, but didn't answer. Everything inside her screamed that this was only the first step towards something unknown. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, twirling a cup of coffee in her hands. Dawn was beginning to break outside the window. Its soft light flooded the room, but she did not feel at peace. Ethan was still asleep. They were both tired after that tense conversation that lasted well into the night. However, there was something important in this conversation, full of tears and pauses. For the first time in a long time, they did not shy away from the truth. Emma cupped her cup in her hands, her mind full of questions. What if they can't get back what they've lost? What if this game was not the beginning of the changes, but only a point from where there is no way back? "You're up early." Ethan's voice brought her out of her thoughts. He was standing in the doorway, his hair was disheveled, and his eyes were tired but soft. Emma noticed that he looked different. His calmness seemed more vulnerable than usual. "I couldn't sleep," she answered honestly. "Do you want to make coffee?" "I'll do it myself, thank you." He went to the coffee machine, taking out a cup. Silence filled the room again, but this time it was not tense, but rather thoughtful. "I was thinking," he began without turning around, "that maybe we could do something together. Just try to start small." Emma looked up. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Walk, dinner. Anything that will remind us. Why did we even start this life together?" His words touched her. It was Ethan, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. Sincere, trying to find a solution. "It sounds good. That's a good idea," she said, allowing a faint smile to appear on her face. Later that evening, they went to the park, where they loved to walk when they first started dating. Emma walked along the narrow path, feeling a little tense. It was their first evening together in a long time, which was not marred by irritation or silence. "Do you remember the first time we got lost here?" Ethan asked, smiling faintly. Emma laughed. "You said back then that you were guided by the stars, but in the end we walked in circles." "At least I was able to convince you that it was romantic," he teased. Their laughter sounded like something forgotten, something that suddenly came back. Emma felt light, even though she knew that this moment was just the beginning. "Ethan," she said suddenly, stopping, "I think we need to talk to Sophia and Jason." He froze, his smile fading. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she replied firmly. We can't pretend that nothing happened. They were also a part of this evening. Ethan frowned, but nodded. Good. But what do you want to tell them? Emma sighed. I don't know. Simply, I want honesty. Sophia invited them to dinner next Saturday. When Emma and Ethan arrived at their house, her heart was pounding. She felt that this conversation could change everything, but she understood that it was necessary. Sophia met them at the door, beaming with her usual energy, but Emma noticed a slight wariness in her gaze. Jason was standing behind her, holding a glass of wine. Well, Sophia said when they sat down at the table, I feel like this dinner is coming interesting. Emma glanced at Ethan, who looked as tense as she was. Sophia, Jason, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I think we all need to discuss. That evening, Sophia froze, her smile gone. Jason took a sip of wine, but didn't say anything. It was weird, Emma continued, but it made Ethan and me realize that we stopped being who we were a long time ago. And I think you may have felt something similar. Sophia slowly put the glass down on the table. You're right, she said softly. This evening revealed a lot that I didn't want to admit. Jason looked at her. His face remained calm, but there was tension in his eyes. We've discussed this too, he said at last. And I think we all had to go through it to figure out what's next. Ethan sighed, his shoulders relaxing. Emma and I have a long way to go, he said. But we are ready to work on it. Sophia and Jason exchanged glances. So are we, Sophia said, her voice firm, but there was pain in it. But first we all need to be honest. Emma nodded, feeling her heart constrict. This conversation was not the end. It was just the beginning of something new, something complicated, but perhaps more real. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.